Test 49, section 4, number 21, an ethicist claims people who avoid alcoholic beverages simply because they regard them as a luxury beyond their financial means should not be praised for their abstinence. That's a dick thing to say. Like, somebody can't afford booze, so they never buy booze. I could praise them for their decision to never buy booze, because there's plenty of people who can't afford booze but buy it anyway. So what are you talking about? We shouldn't praise these people for this. Anyway, similarly, those who avoid alcohol simply because they lack the desire to partake should not be praised. Wow, this is a real lovely person to have around, this ethicist. Don't praise them. Don't praise them either. Oh, unless this disinclination has somehow resulted from an arduous process of disciplining oneself to refrain from acting indiscriminately on one's desires. So my sister, for example, she's a teetotaler. Never had a drop of alcohol in her life, even at her wedding. She never wanted to drink, so she just never drank. But this ethicist would never compliment her for that because she did not have an arduous process of disciplining herself, to refrain from acting indiscriminately on one's desires. Before I go into the answer choices, I want to be really careful here not to confuse sufficient for necessary. When they present conditional reasoning, half of the time the correct answer is going to have something, or the wrong answers. Anyway, half the time they're going to give you the opportunity to confuse sufficient for necessary, okay? I don't know that this ethicist ever wants to compliment anybody for anything. These rules cannot be used to justify a single compliment. Even in the case of somebody who did go through an arduous process of disciplining oneself to refrain from acting indiscriminately on one's desires, all that does is eliminate the do not praise them. It does not get you to therefore praise them. These are these rules are disqualifications only. The first one is absolute. If you can't afford it, and that's why you don't drink, we're never going to praise you for that no matter what. Also, we're pretty much not going to praise people who just don't want to drink, except maybe possibly in the case where they went through this arduous process. But even then, this rule does not force us to compliment those people. It would take me 2 seconds to go through that in my head in real time, because I just know how often they confuse sufficient for necessary on the LSAT, and I just have to note that this rule can never be used to force a compliment. These rules can only be used to eliminate compliments. Which one of the following principles, if valid, most helps to justify, the ethicist's claims? So this turns out to be a strengthen question. I don't know. One of these 5 tends to support this ethicist's idea. It does not have to support their whole idea. It just needs to help them somewhat. So something like never praise poor people, I mean, that would help part of the ethicist's argument. Or something like don't praise people unless they went through an arduous process. That would help this ethicist somewhat. Something like never praise anybody would help this ethicist a lot, because that's all this ethicist is about, is trying not to praise people. This is a depressing question. A, whether behavior should be regarded as praiseworthy is a function of both its consequences, which were never mentioned, and the social context in which the agent acts. That also was never mentioned. Furthermore, saying that something is a function of something else doesn't tell us which direction that function operates in. So I think that A is both irrelevant and not specific enough, and doubly wrong. B, a person should be blamed for an action. I would stop reading that one right there, because this ethicist is not about blaming people either. This is, should we praise or should we not praise? And the ethicist says, don't praise. But not praising is not the same thing as blaming, so I don't need to read any more of B. C, A person is praiseworthy for a particular behavior only if, in order to adopt that behavior, the person at some point had to overcome a desire to do something that he or she felt able to afford to do. That's another way of, it's bigger than because it applies not just to abstaining from alcohol, it applies to everything in the entire world. But, excuse me, if C is true, then we shouldn't praise people for avoiding alcohol unless they can afford it and they had to go through an arduous process in order to eliminate the desire for alcohol. C is perfect. C is going to be the answer. D says, the extent to which the process of acquiring self-discipline is arduous for a person is affected by that person's set of desires and aversions. That has nothing to do with whether we should praise people for anything, so it's wrong. And again, just like A, D is doubly wrong because affected by, we don't know which direction the effect would even be happening. So I don't see how that could, it could weaken just as easily as it could strengthen if we don't know what direction it's going to operate in. But just that alone would be enough to eliminate D. E, the apportionment of praise and blame should be commensurate with the arduousness or ease of the lives, the whole life of this person. That's not at all what the ethicist is talking about. The ethicist never talked about if their whole life is easy, then don't praise them, or if their life is hard, then maybe do praise them, or something like that. That's just not the argument that was made here. The answer is C, because it's kind of a bigger, broader version of the specific instance of what the ethicist is arguing for.